Well, you didn't hear that, but the text was Jeremiah 29:11, and um, that is perfect. We hadn't talked about even what we were talking about today, but that is perfect because we need to remember that that promise was given to Israel after they were destroyed. After God allowed them to be destroyed, he says, I haven't forgotten you, even though you've turned away from me, even though this destruction has come upon you. I think we should remember that the whole time we're here this morning. Crossing to get here, we crossed some railroad tracks, right? And I'm thankful that there is a long pole that comes down, there's lights that go on, and a sound that happens when there's a train approaching. I'm thankful for those, right? I'm thankful that there are stoplights that turn yellow and even red for us to slow down and then to go again. I'm thankful that people put on blinkers to signal that they are coming into my lane or leaving the lane. I'm thankful that there are signs to tell us how to merge and when to stop, and that there are these absurd things called roundabouts, crazy Europeans, right? Where we need to keep watch and make our own decision on when to enter and when to not, but there's still this thing there. What if we ignored any of these signals? Can we see the coming disaster if we ignore the signals, right? On any of these things. Just as a brief review of where we're at in the book of Revelation, and in history, I might add, the world's history. Jesus has opened the seventh seal, the eighth seal, actually now, right? Did I just say that wrong? Seventh seal. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Okay, he opened the seventh seal, okay? And we don't know what the scrolls say. We just see the results of what happened next. And this is the sounding actually now in Revelation chapter 9 of the fifth trumpet. And the sounding of a trumpet is signifying God's presence somewhere, and specifically his judgment and his presence in whatever that brings, okay? Which, of course, it's good news for some and not for others. I've shared this story before, but not from this perspective. My mother has never, ever hit me except for once. She came at me with a wooden spoon because I would not stop teasing my sister. I was 5 years younger. I still am, actually, 5 years younger than my sister, thankfully. But I was 4 grades below her, and we were in the same math grade. And I loved every second of that. And I loved to tell her that we were in the same math grade. I was in 8th grade, and she was a senior in high school, I think. And I loved kind of rubbing it in her face, which is, of course, is devastating to my sister in some ways, right? It's already a wound there. She's much better than me in many categories, but that happens to be one where I excelled early on in school. And so I kept making fun of her and kept going. And finally, my mom had enough, and she came at me with a wooden spoon, and she starts, and I didn't know what to do but laugh, okay? Like, because I was just so surprised that my mother would do this, you know? And she falls on top of me, and she slaps me with this wooden spoon because she didn't know what else to do. She told me to be quiet several times. And then she goes, just wait until your father gets home. And I will tell you, you know that is the longest couple hours of your entire life when you're waiting for that, because you know, let's just say justice was served, okay? We don't need to go into details. But think about justice for a second. It was terrible for me. I didn't like that. Think about what it was for my sister. She loved every second of that justice, didn't she? Because she's like, see, this is what you deserve, you little punk, you know? Justice is wonderful for the oppressed. It is terrible for the oppressor. This is traditional throughout the entire Bible, and Israel has played both roles, by the way. God's people have played both roles in this process. Last week, Jonah asked the question. He shared on Revelation chapter 8. He asked the question, how long, Lord? How long will you watch the oppression of your people, and how long before you actually do something? And finally, we're seeing here that each time this trumpet blows, that Justice is coming to make it right again. But let us remember that the night is darkest right before the dawn, right? It gets really rough. Let's read the first half of Revelation 9. And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft, and then from the smoke came locusts of the earth. And they were given power like the power of the scorpions on the earth. But they were told not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green plant, or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not kill them, and their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death, and they won't find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates of iron, like the breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails and they sting like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek it is Apollyon. Originally, this was Jonah's text. And he's laughing right now because I kind of cursed his name a bit this week, that I got stuck with this portion, and he kind of got let off the hook. This was really tough, okay? Like, how do you go about navigating this stuff, and how do you preach this in a way that is helpful? Just bear with me, okay? And I might need forgiveness today and some grace. Just to give us a little bit of context of what John is talking about, is locusts were an incredibly destructive force, but he's saying, look, they don't actually eat anything green. They're here to hurt human beings. There was something called the cult of Apollo. It had the symbol of the locust in John's time, and the emperors, actually quite a few of them, thought of themselves to be reincarnated Apollo. This was the primary deity of the Romans. So what is he saying? John is actually saying, the Roman Empire, and actually every single empire that acts in destructive ways like this, is actually, where do they get their power from? It's from Satan himself. This should have alarmed us right at the beginning when it said a star falling from heaven. And at the end here, it's literally talking Apollyon and Abaddon. The literal terms for those are the destroyer. What does destruction even mean? And when you think of the word destruction, what comes to your mind? From order to chaos. Generally, when I think of destruction, I think of a burning building or something breaking down. I don't think that's as much of God's concern. And I don't think that's actually what this is talking about. I think this is chaos and destruction, and it actually points back to the chaos that reigned the earth before God started creation. Formless and void, and it had no point to it. Destruction comes in many forms, but I don't think this is talking just about natural disasters and things that happen to destroy. But I think these are specific. The locusts are people, by the way, and it is the ones who have basically the power of the destroyer in their lives, and they destroy other things that they come into contact with. And I just have to say, I don't think the worst pain in life is physical. I think a lot of times we look at the end times and we think about, oh, they're going to lock us up in prisons and there's all these things that are going to happen. And yes, okay, maybe those things are going to happen, but think about the precursor of that. What does it take for people to get there? And I think every intentional atrocity that happens at the hands of people, it comes, I think, in small doses until it reaches a point where there is no return. This week, we were reading in Mere Christianity in our college group, and Jonah was thankful. I'm thankful for him for pointing this out. I didn't even highlight this. But C.S. Lewis points this out. He says, an apparently trivial indulgence in lust or anger today is the loss of a ridge or a railway line or a bridgehead from which the enemy may launch an attack that was otherwise impossible. You hear? One more time. One more time. An apparently trivial indulgence in lust or anger today is the loss of a ridge or railway line or bridgehead from which the enemy may launch an attack that was otherwise impossible. Now, C.S. Lewis's focus is probably centered more on World War II because that's the time frame he was given. And so I thought about that, and how would it, in the world, would it be possible for Christians, okay, Seventh-day Adventists, many of them, right, that were German, to join the forces of Hitler? Do you ever wonder about that? Like, how is this possible where you're following Christ and but I think you watch the breakdown of how it happened in the society, and it was the gentle dehumanization of the Jews. It starts with something very small. And you give in to hate and to anger at a race of human beings. And it's one thing for us to give in and to watch the enemy even take those things, right? But if we give in to those things too much, we realize that we're the ones actually fighting alongside of the enemy himself. We tend to look at prophetic writings and we think that because we have a special knowledge or we have something, but it's so much more than that. Is God's presence in your life? Is his peace and his love there even for your enemies? I think there's a temptation, okay? I think sometimes we look at the Bible and it is our guide, isn't it? And sometimes we look at the Old Testament, it should be, yes, thank you. The Old Testament, and we use examples and we get things out of there that kind of excuse our behavior, and we start to think, well, the Israelites did this and actually God kind of moved them in this way. But I have to remind us that if we use Old Testament examples of how to act and how to treat other people, we have to realize that many times God is bringing them a step in the right direction, okay? That's not the ideal. The barbaric cultures that were surrounding the Old Testament people, it was insane. Why does he talk about forcing other nations to eat their own children? You ever read that? Why is that stuff in there? Actually, that's a huge, huge step in the right direction. I'm not trying to explain it. I still don't fully understand that. It's really weird, okay? But that's a huge step in the right direction from what they would do. And he's continuing to make this. And so sometimes I think sometimes we like to use Old Testament illustrations and we like to make our point with them. And I just say be careful, because that is not the ideal many times. The Old Testament is not there to show us how to live a lot of times. That is for Christ. The whole point of this is to point them to Jesus Christ, right? He is the absolute revelation of God. My worry sometimes when we do this is why do we do it? We're not Davidians. We're not all these things. We are Christian. And sometimes it's because I think we want to do those things, right? And I think the desire to destroy our enemies is the polar opposite from the life of Jesus, whether it be an emotional destruction or whatever it is. It's the polar opposite of the life of Jesus, who would rather be killed by his enemy in hopes of their redemption than kill his enemies to save them. That's not saying that he never opposed them, okay? He called them children of the devil. That is some pretty strong language. But as we know, he did it with a tear in his eye. Be careful of our emotions behind what we're doing, lest we give into the enemy. Okay, so I think he made this really apparent by the way he said, he talked about this in the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, like, be careful about even hating your brother. You said it's bad to murder? Sure, of course it's bad to murder, but if you even hate your brother or your sister, you're in danger of the fires of destruction, which is linked to this term, by the way. Be very careful with this. Now look, these things, okay, this is what I was talking about. I was struggling with this because this whole thing is pretty destructive, right? But these things are a sign. They are symbols. They are warning sirens for when the end is coming, right? Thank you. One yes. And if I'm honest, I struggle between two worlds. Okay, yes, very well, we're getting there. You're jumping mine. Okay. Thank you, Paul. But I have to be honest, I think it's important to struggle in these two areas, okay? Versus sometimes I see many prominent people, okay, within our denomination and outside of our denomination, and in my opinion, they have become alarmists. And the way that they have done it is this, okay? Is they I think these verses and everything that is happening in the end of this world is incredibly cryptic for a reason, okay? And if we're jumping to some major conclusions out of things, and I hear many people that are prominent preachers in our denomination, I hear them do this, and it makes my skin crawl a little bit because we jump to massive conclusions about what these things actually mean. I have to keep in mind, I think we should keep in mind that most people do not understand prophecy until we're looking backwards. Just keep that in mind. We have to be humble about this stuff. I'm not saying some of them aren't right, okay? I'm just saying that they make some massive leaps, and I think we need to be a little bit careful and a little bit humble when approaching texts like this. The easiest example of this is the entire life of Jesus, and even his closest companions didn't understand the basic things he was telling them until he's risen there talking to him in his face. And then they go, oh, that's what you've been talking about this whole time. We thought you meant, we didn't know what you meant, and this doesn't make any sense. God doesn't call us to know all of these things and to feel like we know information as a comfort, okay? We know information to know him. And we are to remain faithful to him, and that is the most important thing we can possibly do in our time right now. There are sirens blaring. Do you hear them? Do you hear them? I struggle between that, not jumping to conclusions and being an alarmist, between that and not becoming not just passive because we just don't know anything. We do know something, don't we? Look, it says here that God will protect and eventually save his people from Abaddon. Look, I don't think this actually means we get to keep our comfort, and I don't even think it means we get to keep our life necessarily, by the way. That may be taken from us. We've seen throughout Christianity, there has been martyrs. In fact, they're the ones crying out, "How long, Lord?" Our lives might be taken, our comforts might be taken, they're a struggle, but he will protect and save us in the end. Do we believe that? That is the question. Look, the Exodus story has long been the story that is not only quoted and referenced in both testaments, it's the most popular thing to reference what this life is all about. Our journey from slavery to the promised land, because that's what we're waiting for, isn't it? The promised land? Don't you long for that place? That's good. Keep longing for it. But here, listen to this. Exodus 19, verse 4. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and I brought you to me. Notice what this is in this verse. He says, I brought you to what? He brought you to me. They wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. And what did they do? They complained, they moaned, it was just terrible. They longed for Egypt, for crying out loud. And they didn't utilize the time and the opportunity they had to know their Creator. That was the whole point of it. And in turn, they get to the land of Canaan and they end up turning it on its head and it's taken from them. Because they did not utilize the time and the wandering of the wilderness. Right now, we are still in the wilderness, church family. We are still out there in the wandering of this world, and it's not great, right? But we can still have absolute joy in the process of knowing our Creator in this time. Knowing that the promised land is coming, but the promised land, it is nothing without the promised one. Sometimes I think we look towards this promised land and we just want all the problems of this life to go away, and I'm with you. But we must commune with the promised one, and he has a joy that is so amazing that we can actually enjoy the journey in the struggle of the wilderness. The promised land can be experienced in our hearts today, now. That salvation that he brings. The escape from the torture of these stinging locust creatures can be escaped simply because we know him and we believe him in our bones. That no matter, he says, don't be afraid who can destroy your body. Don't be afraid of it. So don't. I say it like it's so easy, right? It's not. But this time period is when demonic forces are unleashed upon the world and everyone not bearing the mark. It will be one of the greatest witnessing times in Earth's history. Maybe the greatest witnessing time. It will be amazing, you guys. In a horrifying way, it already is. It is here. These things are already happening. If Jesus came tomorrow, would any of you be surprised? Just because we haven't experienced a certain amount of these things doesn't mean it doesn't happen all over the world. We have to be ready as if it was tomorrow and realize that it might not happen in our lifetime. I know that's crazy for some of us to hear, but it might not. I hope it does, though. For those of you who couldn't hear it, yes, Gary was saying that many of his clients just want to know what's happening. They want to know what's going on. I will just say, I came across an old band I used to listen to. I listened to their album. They're called Atreyu. I highly do not recommend it, by the way, okay? They are a new metal band, but the whole thing is about the whole thing is called Baptized. The album is called Baptized, and it starts with the strange powers of prophecy, and they realize that this world is ending. In fact, many musicians and many artists, especially in that genre, are calling for this. They see it. And they don't know the Creator, but they see it. I take a look at the people who know God best, both the spiritual giants of the Bible and even people in my own life, and I will just say that despite the misery of the world, there is a joy that surpasses all comprehension that they have. Because they actually believe this stuff. They know what's coming. They know that he is coming and he is going to make things right again. He will create justice. But the reality is that there is this passivity that can come with waiting. And I don't think that is definitely not a good alternative, right? Jesus said this, at the time of his coming, it will be just like the time of Noah. It'll be just like Sodom and Gomorrah. And the people ask, where will this take place? And he says, the coming of the kingdom is actually within all of you. And then he shares this story about the persistent widow in front of an unrighteous judge. And she comes at him again and again and again. And even though he's unrighteous, he's like, what am I supposed to do with you? Fine, I will grant you what you're asking for. I will grant you justice, he says. And Jesus says, listen to the righteous judge. How much more, he says. In Luke chapter 17, I think this is verse 8. I actually don't know. I didn't write that part down. He says, and will God not bring about justice for the chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? I think that is a question that we all need to take incredibly seriously right now. This is a gut check. At the end of the book, the Lucifer Diaries, it is a book about his perspective, Lucifer's perspective when the world actually comes to him. At the very end, Jesus comes back to earth and he is there and he's walking through a crowd of people and he's looking in eyes and he's desperately looking for his friends and he finds very few. When he comes into this place, when he comes back and he looks into our eyes, will he find the faith of the perseverant saints? Will he find us, church? I hope so. I think we need to be just like that persistent widow, and we need to plead with him day and night. And if an unrighteous judge is going to be worn down, God will be worn down by our pleas too. That's why when Gary started this, he talked about Jeremiah 29:11 and seeking him with our entire heart. We sang a song that says, take the things away from us that we can't give. And I think we should pray for that right now. I think this world is at a time where the alarms and sirens are going off all over the place, and we must respond, not just for our sakes. Let us pray. Jesus, thank you for warning signs. Thank you that it isn't even limited to the Bible, Lord. You are making yourself known in the human heart for people that haven't known you before. I've been talking to people this week that it's the same thing. They know you're up to something. They know there's something going on in the world, and they need hope. Lord, I pray that this place and the words that come out of the mouths of these people, that they find that hope. I pray that that hope is buried so deep within our hearts and in our bones that we can't help but speak about it when the time is right, Lord. That we have the wisdom that you give and the peace that you give and when to speak. I pray that we are in tune with your words. Not just your written ones, but the ones you have the ability to speak to each one of our hearts today. Thank you so much for not leaving us stranded, leaving us without these warning signs, but Lord, I pray for help. Save us, Lord. Let your justice come quickly and let us be on the side that is crying, how long, Lord, will you watch this? Because they do not question. They don't question whether you're good or not. They question it because they know you're good. Come soon, Lord. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.